Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole for the District of Squamish on Tuesday, April 14th, 2026. I am Councillor Pettingill, and I am acting mayor for the month of April, so I am serving as the chair of this Committee of the Whole meeting. Welcome to the Squamish Nation traditional territory. Please be advised that this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish website following the meeting. If you have concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting. And today that's Melissa Von Bladeau over the side here. Just before we get into it, I did recognize that today is unfortunately the 10th anniversary of the toxic drug crisis. And it's frustrating to recognize that. We seem to, I don't think anyone thinks it's okay. And we don't seem to be able to come together as a province to find evidence, follow the evidence-based measures we know should work to address this. I think we've done a decent job with the limited tools we have in Squamish to try evidence-based solutions. But we need a lot more support from the province, and hopefully we can all keep advocating for that. And I'd like to thank the folks at Helping Hands and other not-for-profits locally who are doing actually much more than their part to try and find a way through this. So thank you to everyone who does their best to help there. With that, I will call for an adoption of the agenda. Councillor Stoner moves, Councillor French seconds. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that carries. And our first topic for today is the 2026 Community Wildfire Resilience Plan. I'd like to invite our staff, and it is our Emergency Program Manager, Mr. Svane. Is that Svane? Svane, who will be leading the discussion. So I'll leave it to you to introduce your team and please take it away.
Yes, through the chair, good morning. My name is Simon Svane, Emergency Program Manager. With me today, I have Fire Chief Aaron Foote, and online we have Blackwell, who will be presenting on this plan. The intent of this agenda item is to present the new Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan and seek endorsement from Council at a future meeting. A CWRP, as it's referred to, is foundational for the district to continue mitigating and preparing for wildfire risk. And it's also a requirement to continue getting Fire Smart funding, as you need to have had a plan adopted or endorsed within the last 5 years. Changes to the grant structure has put time pressure on us to get the plan completed in order to apply for new Fire Smart funding, which the new application date is April 30th. For the presentation of the plan, we have Blackwell with us here, who completed the plan on behalf of the district. And I will hand it over to them to present before we can find time for discussion.
Okay, thank you. So I see Brin on my screen. I think it's over to you to please take it away.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I will share my screen. Hi, my name is Brin Farrell. I work for Blackwell Consulting, and I wrote the Community Wildfire Resilience Plan for Squamish, and we have here as well as Deborah. She's the signing professional. Both of us have been supporting the Squamish Wildfire Management Program for the last 6 or 7 years with developing fuel management prescriptions and supervising the operational implementation of these treatment units, and then doing various Fire Smart assessments and community events over the years. So the presentation is going to focus on the goals and intent of the Community Wildfire Resilience Plan.
Sorry, Brin, we don't see the presentation on our screen yet. Have you shared it?
Let me try. Entire screen, yeah. Can you see it now?
No. Russell, can we get some assistance here? And we'll try for a minute or so, and then maybe we'll have to take a bit of a recess, but we'll see what we can get to.
You have presenter privilege. You just need to press share, and then there you go.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay, you can see it now.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, this is all you missed, so I'll go. So that, yes, we'll talk about the process of the plan development, and then we'll move through some of the key recommendations that were an outcome of the plan. So goals of, I'll refer to it as a CWRP, is that to increase the efficiency of fire suppression and emergency response, to reduce potential impacts and loss to property and critical infrastructures from wildfire, and then to reduce wildfire behavior threat within the community. Okay, so for the development of this plan, we started with a background review, which included a review of relevant bylaws and plans related to wildfire, vegetation, emergency response and evacuation, as well as some adjacent plans like the Squamish Lillooet Regional District CWRP, Squamish Nation CWRP, and then some high-level plans as well that inadvertently affect some wildfire conditions in the area. And then we did field work in July. Field work focused on assessing forested stands in public land within the community. So we were giving these stands a threat rating based on just the fuel structure in the forest. And then we also looked at general fire smart conditions of neighborhoods and critical infrastructure, as well as reviewed some evacuation and emergency layout of the community. And then for the plan development, we did GIS mapping to update the wildfire risk of Squamish spatially. And then we described the risk of wildfire to different communities within Squamish. And then we developed an action plan, which consists of 53 recommendations to improve wildfire resilience in the neighborhood. So the CWRPs are different from CWPPs. So this plan is to replace what Squamish had prior was a community wildfire protection plan in 2017. So now we've moved to community wildfire resilience plans, and they have a stronger focus on fire smart principles. So the plan is structured to give these give the recommendations by fire smart principle, and really kind of engage the community to help take on some of the responsibility to help make a more resilient community. So the area of interest for the plan focused on the municipal boundary of Squamish, which is the white outline on these maps. And then we specifically looked at the wildland urban interface that overlapped the municipal boundary. So the wildland urban interface is the area where structures and humans interact with wildland vegetation. So in Squamish, that vegetation is mostly forested land. And then within the wildland urban interface, you can have interface communities and intermixed communities and homes. So interface have a clear, abrupt boundary between development and forest land, and then the intermixed homes and communities are embedded within the forest. So within the wildland urban interface, fire can move from the forest into communities, or vice versa. A fire could ignite in a home or structure and then move into the forest. And then for funding purposes, our wildland urban interface looks at an area that has a structure density of 6 structures per square kilometer, and then buffered by 1 kilometer. So that's how we got that this red bubble here on the map. Oh, and then the photos here are aerial images of some homes in the highlands and smoke bluffs. And those would be like intermixed homes. So for the fieldwork, we conducted wildfire threat assessment plots in strategic locations like the interface areas near critical infrastructures along access and egress routes. And then at these plots, we looked at surface and ladder fuel and understory fuel to examine a wildfire behavior threat rating, which we used to inform some of our recommendations and then potentially develop some proposed fuel treatment units on public land. So some of the key findings of the plan, here are some of the wildfire resilient factors in Squamish. So from a weather perspective, Squamish does not experience the same hot, dry climate as some areas in the interior do. We are influenced by a coastal weather system, which keeps things more moist, and it makes our forest composition include more deciduous and more shrubs, such as a higher moisture content, which helps reduce the wildfire threat ratings. And another factor is that the built-up area in Squamish is mostly on the flat terrain, though we are moving up a slope into some more slope terrain as the community grows uphill. We also have good water supply, access and egress, and yeah, new construction is typically fire smart as well. So some wildfire risks that we noted during the plan development was that number one is that the topography, like I said, as we are moving upslope, more homes are just being built mid-slope. So we have 33% of the wildland urban interface is on a 30% slope, and fire moves quicker upslope. So that is a risk factor. It was noted by first responders that topography is a major factor that influences wildfire behavior in the area. And we do have high fire danger conditions sometimes during the summer, like even though we are a coastal community, it does happen, and it happens more and more lately. And then BC Wildfire Services also noted that coastal slash is a fuel type of concern in the area. As well, we have lots of intermixed neighborhoods like the Highlands, Skyridge, Crumpet Drive that are really embedded in these continuous forest lands. And lastly, a big one is that we have a lot of visitors, especially in the summer months, which coincides with the wildfire season. And these visitors are often recreational, so they're in the trails in the forested land. And we noted that 80% of fire ignitions in the area are human caused. So we updated the wildfire threat rating of the neighborhood, and we use our own methodology to do this, that we apply across all CWRPs that we develop, and we base it on fuel types, climate, slope and aspect, and historical fire occurrences. So of that, we've noted that 24% of accessible land is ranked as a moderate threat rating, and then 60% is low, and we have 3% as high wildfire behavior threat ratings. So these higher ones are associated with discrete pockets of hazardous fuel types. As you can see, they're in red on the maps there. And then these moderate and higher threat ratings are almost always associated with sloped terrain as well. So you can see it on like the edges of the developed area in Squamish. It's important to note that we cannot assess private land. So that is a big limitation to getting a thorough understanding of the fire threat ratings. But we're not able to do that on the private lands. That's the gray area on the map there. So low areas generally have less volatile fuels and are located in areas with low potential for fire spread, and they're typically flat as well. And then moderate is developed or undeveloped land that can support surface fires generally. And then our highs are continuous forest land that support candling, intermittent or continuous crown fires, which are tougher to action upon. Okay, so as I mentioned, we had 53 recommendations that came out of the plan, and they are organized into the fire smart discipline. So we have education, which focuses on the public, and then we have emergency planning, and that includes like preparation, actioning, and recovering from fire events. Then we have vegetation management, so that's the reduction of vegetation fields in high risk and moderate risk areas. And legislation and planning are enforcement mechanisms. Development considerations include access, egress, water supply, the creation of defensible spaces around homes and at the neighborhood level. And then interagency cooperation is working together with different agencies and jurisdictions for a common goal of wildfire resiliency. And then cross-training is building relationships and learning from other professionals. So I'll just go through some of the key recommendations by fire smart discipline. So under the education principle, we have number 1 is to hire a full-time fire smart coordinator, which has just actually happened. So this new role will take on a lot of like actioning the recommendations of this plan and really like lead the fire smart program for Squamish. And Squamish is at a point that we need more capacity to do this. So having a full-time position will help with a lot of these actions. And then number 2 is to continue the fire smart program. So core elements like home assessments, the chipping program, and the rebate program should continue to be offered. We have to align fire danger messaging. So key stakeholders during consultation noted that inconsistent fire ban messaging between agencies was a priority issue that creates public confusion. So coordinating the posting and communication of fire bans and fire use should be consistent across the district, BC Parks, Ministry of Forests, and land managers. We also have to find community champions. So that was building and maintaining a roster of community champions that can support some of these neighborhood initiatives and really help the Fire Smart program or the coordinator keep momentums throughout these different neighborhoods. And that strengthens public engagement. And then we have increased trailhead signage. So trailheads and campgrounds offer high visibility locations to reach recreation users and out-of-town visitors. Okay, so for legislation and community planning, we have the wildfire landscaping bylaw, education and outreach. So there is a wildfire landscaping bylaw that was created as a result of the 2017 CWPP, but there's limited public awareness of the bylaws, and that was noted during consultation for this plan, and that is a gap to voluntary compliance in existing neighborhoods. And then we have to strengthen compliance with wildfire regulations such as this. So compliance and enforcement was noted as a challenge. Clearer coordination and consistent follow-up where non-compliance is identified, and outreach efforts can improve its effectiveness. And then critical infrastructure resilience. So in 2021, there were critical infrastructure wildfire assessments completed. So recommendations from these assessments should be implemented by priority and as feasible. So for development considerations, so there's also the wildfire development plan application, but during consultation it was noted that it isn't very user-friendly, so some minor adjustments should be made to simplify the framework, which will make it more consistently applied throughout neighborhoods. Yeah, so the current structure is difficult to interpret as it is, which limits its effectiveness. So for interagency cooperation, we have the FireSmart collaborative meeting. So part of the process of this plan, we created a community FireSmart committee. It's CFRC, so there's so many acronyms. But it was basically a working group of key planners that are involved in wildfire management for the district. So we had representatives of different departments like the emergency services, fire department, the previous FireSmart coordinator participated. And then we had adjacent jurisdictions like the SLRD, we had the Natural Resource District, Squamish Nation, and then BC Wildfire Services. So we had 3 meetings throughout the development of the plan, and that helped inform some of the action items that came out of the plan. But as this new FireSmart coordinator position has been fulfilled, these meetings should continue to keep momentum going and to ensure that there's alignment across everyone for the actions. And then similar to that is to create a fuel management forum. So this would be a different working group that really focuses on fuel management in the area, and then can align our fuel management treatments with adjacent jurisdictions and the Ministry of Forests, Natural Resource District, Community Forests, like all of these different agencies that are working on fuel management. So that can be something that will be taken on by the FireSmart coordinator as well. And then we have right-of-way maintenance. So that is just to encourage transportation and utility providers like BC Hydro, Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, CP Rails, and independent River of the Run projects to keep implementing vegetation management best practices along transmission corridors, highways, railways, all right-of-ways to just reduce ignition potential. And that would be more of an advocating role. That would be how the district would implement that, is to keep the communication with these different agencies. Okay, for cross-training and departmental resources, we have Squamish Fire Rescue. They already do joint training sessions with BC Wildfire Services, and this should be continued to keep strengthening their wildfire response and interface operational skills. As well, new members should receive wildfire-specific training each season. And then we have regional wildfire training. So this can be achieved through having the Squamish Fire Department hosting regional exercises and training activities for other departments to improve coordination across neighboring jurisdictions. So examples could be having the Britannia Beach Volunteer Fire Department, the North Squamish Fire Society, and Whistler Fire Rescue do some joint training sessions. Emergency planning. So we have quite a few key recommendations under this umbrella. The one is to share emergency plans. All emergency response and evacuation plans should be shared amongst agencies who would be involved in wildfire preparedness and response to ensure alignment and clarity of roles. For example, the Sea to Sky evacuation plan is a multi-jurisdictional plan that requires quite a lot of response coordination. And then the hazard risk vulnerability assessment should be updated. The last one that was completed was in 2015, and written in the OCP, it requires this to be updated every 5 years. So that is due for an update to identify new hazards as the community has grown and changed. And then we have water delivery assessments. So emergency services and fire department identified limited water availability as an operational challenge in several areas that are not serviced by hydrants. So a water delivery capacity assessment should take place to evaluate things like water tender access, shuttle operations, and potential use of natural water sources in these areas with limited water. And then we have fire rescue staffing. So review fire department staffing needs and ensure capacity remains aligned with increasing wildfire related planning and operational needs. Squamish Fire Rescue has noted that staffing levels have not kept pace with Squamish population growth. Then we have fire rescue equipment. So acquire a dedicated water tender and expand apparatus capacity to enhance water delivery to non-hydrant locations. And there's a list of some additional equipment that can keep being purchased and to increase the fire department's capabilities to assess these more hard to reach wildland fires. And then we have to conduct mock evacuation drills for Paradise Valley, Garibaldi Highlands, and University, and downtown to explore different potential scenarios that could complicate access. So those areas were noted as neighborhoods that have some different factors that could complicate evacuation. Okay, so vegetation management, there's also quite a few key recommendations from this part. So we have to expand the Fire Smart program to include vegetation management of municipal parks, trails, and critical infrastructure. Collaborate with recreational associations like SORCA, Smoke Bluffs Association, to organize a community trail cleanup day or develop an adopt a trail program. We have to develop a Fire Smart Trail Best Management Practices Guide to guide trail planning, construction, and maintenance. Develop and launch a cedar hedge reduction incentive program to encourage property owners to replace flammable cedar hedges. Kamloops municipality has done this recently and it was quite successful. And these cedar hedges often create fuel pathways throughout neighborhoods. There was like along Doward Drive, there's this continuous path of cedar hedges that was in one of the previous photos, which is an example of these fuel pathways that are created. We have to develop new fuel management prescriptions and advance priority fuel treatments as identified in the plan. There was a few fuel treatment units that we identified that could be implemented. And then to amend, the district has some completed fuel management prescriptions that were put out to bid and were never pursued. So we suggest to re-tender these. There's new chipping guidance thresholds so they could be amended to incorporate these new thresholds, which reduces the cost of implementing and could increase bidder potential. But also to consider using municipal funds to top up provincial funding to increase bidder interest for these units because they are quite expensive. And there was a lack of bidders for 2 of the treatments, the last 2 ones that were put out. And then support partner agencies like the Community Forest, BC Parks, and the Natural Resource District in their own fuel management programs. And encourage licensees to practice enhanced post-logging / cleanup in the wildland urban interfaces. Like I noted before, BC Wildfires Services had identified coastal / as a concerning fuel type in the area. And that is it. We had quite a few other recommendations, but these are the highest priority ones that we noted. So now I will open the floor for any questions or discussions. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks. I realized I forgot to check in about presentation time versus question time, and we actually ended up exactly where I thought we might want to end up. So appreciate that. Council, any questions? Councillor French and then Councillor Stoner.
Thanks, Chair. I didn't see any reference to landscape companies as potential partners in reducing the risk of wildfire. And then I thought maybe that was a conscious decision. Maybe past experience has shown that landscape companies don't really need any hand-holding because they've got this dialed and they're fully on side with wildfire prevention. So just wondering if you could talk to us a bit about landscape companies, their involvement, and the lack of reference to them in the documentation.
Please go ahead, Ms. Farrell.
Okay, sorry. Simon, let me know if you want to jump in at all. No, there was no identification of landscape companies in the plan. I mean, there's a Fire Smart Landscaping Best Management guide that was developed for Squamish in, I think, 2020. So that is available on the website. This was just, it never came up during consultation as a major stakeholder who plays a key role in fire smart or wildfire resilience in the in Squamish. I think the way that the program is focused is on homeowners taking the initiative. So through these fire smart assessments and the rebate program, I mean, it would be up to them to reduce their like flammable vegetation around their homes. But yeah, I don't. Yeah, have you
Just the only other addition is the Fire Smart BC plant program, but that is more for garden centers. But I mean, the options are there, and it's up to the Squamish Fire Smart program, I guess, how they want to partner with landscaping companies.
Okay, great. And I have one more. I'm interested in hearing a little bit about timelines around item number 38 in the table of recommendations, suggesting holding tabletop neighborhood evacuation drills as a high priority. The suggested areas there are Paradise Valley, Garibaldi Highlands, downtown. So have any tentative dates for any such exercise been set? And maybe some thoughts on how soon could we have the first one taking place?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. There are currently no plans to conduct said evacuation drills. We are hoping to explore UBCM evacuation grant funding next year, and that could be a potential way to get there.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Stoner, and then I'll go to Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. I'll start with some just high level questions. Appreciate all the work on this and important piece to update our community wildfire resilience plan. I am curious how we contextualize this report vis-a-vis the other hazard assessments. So our community risk assessment report is quite outdated. And there's obviously, we know we have a lot of hazards and those are becoming more challenging to deal with. So how do we put this report into context of all the other hazards that we're trying to manage at the same time in terms of prioritizing the work in front of us?
Through the chair, yes, that is a great question. We are overdue for an update of the HRVA, but we are also kind of awaiting guidance from the province. They are currently, well, they implemented the new Emergency and Disaster Management Act in 2023, which provided direction around response, but we're still waiting to see what it actually looks like for emergency planning. So once we have that clear direction, it'll be easier for us to know where we want to put our efforts and how we want to move forward with emergency planning. And current plans we already have in place is to conduct a review of existing District of Squamish emergency plans once we see the new regulations and how we can move forward from there.
Thanks for that context. I know we're in a bit of a holding pattern and those regulations are now not expected until at least the fall. So it's like that catch-22 where you're trying to do the work, but you don't have a strong regulatory framework to do the work in. The other piece that I'm curious is the multimodal evacuation plan and who led that the first time and whose responsibility is it to update it? There's some recommendations in here to do that based on our growth. But as I understand, it was a kind of multi-jurisdictional plan. And so I'm just curious who would take that on.
Through the chair, I am uncertain about who conducted it the first time as I was not present for that. But the responsibility is for the Squamish Emergency Program to lead the update if we wish to see that. The first multimodal evacuation plan was made in partnership across the sea to sky. And I imagine we would want to pursue a similar partnership for an update of the plan.
Great, thank you. With respect to the report in front of us, I am curious about engagement with external partners, both for this report as well as for the Resiliency Roundtable. Two particular folks that seemed like notable organizations that were missing. One was Tourism Squamish, and then the other one was Woodfibre LNG. Also in the report in section 3.36 that highlights hazardous values within the community, LNG is not included in that section either. And so I'm just curious if there's a bit of a gap here in terms of how we assess the risk that's happening on the west side of the sound.
Through the chair, I might ask Blackwell if they have any context on this.
So during the initiation of the plan, we were working with the Fire Smart coordinator, who's no longer with the district, but it was a decision of who was going to be included in those working tables back in May, and they had decided at that time not to include LNG.
I was part of that initial those initial discussions, and from my memory as well, it partly had to do with the fact that we weren't going to be assessing that across the sound. The main reason for that, across the sound around Woodfire, the main reason being is that that entire, as we call it, WUI bubble is private land. So there would not have been the opportunity to map an updated wildfire threat or to propose any fuel management units. And that's why. But we do recognize that engaging them, there certainly have been value in that, and tourism Squamish as well. Like I can't speak to, but I see your point.
Yeah, they weren't engaged either throughout it, but there are a couple recommendations that they would be a great partner to collaborate with on. So they are mentioned throughout the plan, and the thing with these forums is that it's going to continue after this plan has been finalized. So it's a great idea to invite stakeholders that you think are missing, and each meeting can be tailored to different topics as well. So if there's meetings that we think they would be more relevant and important to have, they absolutely are allowed to. They can keep engaging with whoever they see fit throughout the next 5 years as this plan stays dated.
Okay, appreciate that additional context in terms of like the forward-looking component, and absolutely we will continue to use this plan to engage. Specifically for section 3.36 of the report, though, in terms of identifying hazardous values throughout our community, many of those are privately owned operations or jointly so. And so I'm just curious why we didn't actually label that as a potential risk in this category.
Yeah, I mean, I think those were identified through the consultation process, and they were never identified, but we can amend the plan to include them if you think they are important for that section. I can add them.
And just like to go to Ms. Lewis, St. Louis, who would like to add a little bit of context here.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, Pascal St. Louis, General Manager of Community Safety and Development. Appreciate your comments about including WLNG as a future participant in this. I think as we learn more about the industrial hazards or the hazards present at that site, they would likely be a very worthwhile participant in that project or in those forums moving forward. And then with regards to tourism Squamish, yes, I think that could very well be useful. I know that a lot of the discussions around visitation and possible ignition sources do also happen with tourism Squamish at the what's the name of the group? It's the Visitor Management Roundtable, where they often talk about like what are the issues that we are seeing in community during high risk events. And so you know, those conversations are happening with tourism Squamish in other ways, but perhaps there's ways that we can include them as part of the wildfire forum as well. Fire Smart Forum, sorry. Thanks.
Can I, one more? And then my other high level question was around some of the recommendations for the planning perspective, and specifically the notes on the subdivision and development control bylaw. I guess I'm just curious, like, and I'm not sure if this is a question to staff or the consultant, but our current subdivision and control bylaw, I'm just curious if it's sufficient to address some of the concerns raised throughout this report. I note that in the neighborhood analysis, like our two newest neighborhoods, Sea and Sky and Skyridge, actually have some of the biggest challenges in terms of access, egress, narrow streets. And so I'm curious if there's a pinch point here that we need to address sooner rather than later as we look at new developments coming online, and the subdivision control bylaw is actually being reviewed as we speak. And so is there an opportunity to address those concerns now, or is that something that will come later?
Hi, Pascal St. Louis, General Manager of Community Safety and Development again. I'll give my colleagues at the table a bit of a hand. Again, we just received this report, so I think those conversations will be live with some of those other teams. The report has been shared with all program areas to get their input and value and expertise. So I think as we start to internalize the recommendations and look at that, I think those conversations will be ongoing with the planning department and building as well.
Can I just interject there? Because this, I appreciate that staff and other departments will look at this in the context of other plans, but what we're asked to endorse here comes with some prioritization and when we do those things. So how do we square sort of the prioritization and what specific things we do with sort of staff taking a look at this and maybe adjusting their plans if council endorses this as is? Like, should we be looking more for accept the feedback at this point, or I'm just...
Through the chair, good question. We are coming to council for endorsement of the plan, and ultimately the plan will be reviewed by staff to see what we want to prioritize. Blackwell has done, I think, a great job at giving us some good insights in what they believe as experts we should tackle first, and we'll have to look at that in our work plans and see if that makes sense. I mean, I think the challenge that we have here is, as Simon mentioned, there is, due to some changes at UBCM, there are some pretty big hurdles we're having to try and jump through to try and get additional Fire Smart funding. And so we're on a bit of a crunch, and having an approved CWRP is a requirement, being able to do that for April 30th. So my assumption is we would come back and talk through some of the prioritization that we see in the plan and see if that still is the district's perspective as well as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I have three questions. Firstly, concerning recommendation number 38, evacuation drills that Councillor French has already touched on. I note that there's explicit reference to Paradise Valley, Garibaldi Highlands University, and the downtown, but not to Valleycliff and adjacent neighborhoods. And this is a conversation that comes up in the Valleycliff neighborhood as to emergency access and egress. I'll just add a footnote that the current emergency access for Valleycliff was developed to address flood risks, but not fire. I just wonder whether as the program might unfold, whether the Valleycliff and adjacent neighborhoods might be included in this evacuation drill proposed programming. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. As I mentioned earlier, there are currently no concrete plans on how we're going to bring these evacuation drills into life. From my perspective, I don't see why we could not include Valleycliff or other parts of the community. Also, realistically, we might have to just focus on one part for the sake of a drill, and then whenever we would get around to a next drill, we could focus on a different part. It would be a very significant amount of work, and not to mention quite cost-consuming to undertake drills for each community neighborhood.
Understood. Thank you. My second question concerns recommendation number 43, hedge removal. It's been addressed a couple of times in the Blackwell consulting presentation. I'm curious about the focus on cedar hedges. And of course, it's a very impressive photo that's been shown of the cedar hedge on Dowd Drive. Now, that's a green, very healthy cedar hedge, but it's my observation around town, and in particularly in Garibaldi Highlands and in Garibaldi Estates on the flats, that we have a lot of unmanaged hedges with dead trees. And I wonder whether it might be prudent, instead of focusing explicitly on cedar, to address the health of and fire risk safety of hedges generally. I see a lot of unmanaged hedges that have just been allowed to grow, and with trees that are dead and standing there for years, really. And I often wonder about fire risk. So I just wonder whether the application of the recommendation might be broadened to hedge management or ornamental conifer hedges treatments. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. With reference to hedges on private property, through home assessments, that is something that the FireSmart coordinator would be able to point out to the homeowner if a specific hedge is of higher risk. And then the recommendation would be for the owner to remove or change or otherwise alter the hedge to minimize the fire risk. And the homeowner would be able to, well, we're exploring the use of rebate programming, so that could support the homeowners in taking action on this. As for public hedges, that would be a broader recommendation that I don't have the answer to how we would prioritize right now.
Thank you. That's helpful. Finally, Chair, my last question concerns recommendation number 46, updating debris management requirements. To quote from the report, updating debris management requirements increases treatment feasibility and supports competitive bidding. Just over a year ago, the previous managers of our local FireSmart program, Mr. Donahue and Ms. Wood, approached me because I had a previous role before coming on council in this general field. And their observation was that the cost of debris disposal was a serious and growing constraint on the program. And they were generating material through the course of a year in neighborhood treatments that there was no solution for. And this is costly. And it's a cost that is addressed or faced by other land managers as well. So my question is, this matter of addressing new methods and programs for woody biomass collection and utilization to alleviate costs of treatment and to expand the potential treatment areas. This is something that goes back to the Philman report, and it does come up in provincial reports, but I don't see it addressed here. That is a recommendation that would encourage the District of Squamish to look at this problem and see it as one that, in fact, our former FireSmart program managers saw it as an opportunity for collaboration with other land managers dealing with debris disposal. We need a receiving and sorting station and ways to use this stuff so that we can alleviate costs. I hope I've been clear enough, but is there more we could do? Do other similar reports address this topic of woody biomass debris disposal? Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I don't have that information right now regarding biomass disposal.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I will go to Mayor Herford. I will note we're over the time allotted to this topic. I think it's important for at least to get through the first round of questions, but if we can keep them tight, it would be appreciated.
I feel attacked by that direction, but all joking aside, thank you for all the work on this. I'm curious about I understand the rationale where private property is not included in this, but we do have these. How do we address the issues that likely exist on these large swaths of private property that are directly adjacent to community? If not this mechanism and this funding program that really this is designed to enable us to access, how, like, are there places where this is where folks are getting this right? Is there some other avenue to do that? I'm thinking of, I mean, in behind Valley Cliff, above the Highland, in around the Highlands, there's large parcels that, which could pose a risk. I'm going to assume if they're going to be similar to the areas that we did look at that are adjacent to them. So how do we, like, how does that get addressed? And any thoughts on that? I get that it's not here, but it still feels like there's a risk that we're not fully understanding at this point.
Through the chair, I think when it comes to managing fuel on private properties, the best thing we can do is to provide the education to the public and make tools available to the public, such as Fire Smart Home Assessment. You'll have a qualified wildfire management specialist show up, provide recommendations, and help guide people to what actions they can take on their property to minimize wildfire impacts. From the perspective of the district, I'm not aware of us having a lot of options for actually enforcing, other than through the bylaws that are enacted for new builds, etc. So to the best of my knowledge, the best approach is education and guiding people to take action.
Yeah, I understand that, and that makes sense to me on like regular, like smaller lot sizes. The pieces that I'm talking about are things like Lafarge property, Fast property, 38, 39 that are up above high. Like these are many hectares and don't have a homeowner that's tending to decide which hedge they're going to put up. But like it's a different scale of thing, and perhaps it's just a blind spot in this, and there could be some specific education or there just to see that if their activities over time can improve the safety there. I guess I'm trying to turn that. I realize there's not a question there. It's more of just a gap.
Mayor, before you go on, I see Ms. Farrell has a hand up. She might want to chime in here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just a comment to add, two things. First thing, recommendation 53 partly speaks to that. And then the other comment is that for the Resort Municipality of Whistler's CWRP update in 2021, they did have a recommendation to address that, which I haven't seen in too many other reports, but the recommendation was basically for the municipality to adopt a policy to notify the private land holders of these large unoccupied parcels to send a letter to notify them of the hazard. That is something I'm not sure if they ended up doing, but I think it's an interesting approach that is separate from it's still education, but it's separate from the Fire Smart piece.
Okay, thank you for that. Actually, I'm gonna, if you're ready for it, Chair, I can move the recommendations, and then I realize my last bit I will use as comment for the same.
I've got a couple more people with questions first.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it to comments. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Hamilton and then Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, thanks very much. I noticed in map 7 on page 51 of the report, there are a fair number of historical fires along the Indian Arm as it comes into Valley Cliff. And that's presumably that's a fairly high recreation zone, and obviously would be prone to whatever other lightning strikes and whatever other natural occurrences happen. We also have, or will have in the very near future, the Eagle Mountain pipeline passing through that valley and passing very close to the residential edge of Valley Cliff. Is there an elevated risk in that zone due to the existence of the Eagle Mountain pipeline?
Through the chair, I am not aware of any assessments laying out this information as of right now.
Okay, so this report didn't deal with that. Is there anywhere that we do? Where does that get regulated, monitored, managed?
I can answer that one. So yeah, that little corridor is outside the wildland urban interface, so it's out of the scope of this plan. However, the Ministry of Forests Natural Resource District does plan to do a wildfire resilience reduction plan within the next 2 years, and that would be within their scope. So it would be under the Ministry of Forests umbrella.
Okay, thanks. And that's addresses outside of this report's boundaries, but the pipeline does enter into this report's boundary and passes through it.
Ms. St. Louis, did you want to take this, or?
Sorry, I just saw that. I don't know if Ms. Farrell, if you had your hand still up to address the pipeline related risks. Again, this CWP is about the wildfire risk, generally about the interface risk within community, and I don't anticipate that the pipeline risk is within scope of this report. Ms. Farrell, you can confirm if that is in fact the case.
Yeah, I agree. This report really does focus on human ignition, structural conditions, and vegetation conditions. So we really look at the forest areas, and I would say, like, within our scope, I wouldn't determine the pipeline development as a risk, a wildfire risk.
Okay, thanks. I'll leave it with one final, I guess, comment. I do understand that it's not a significant ignition risk, but it is, I assume, or I would like to understand, whether if a wildfire were to start in close proximity due to something other than the pipeline, if a wildfire were to start, are we in that area, are we at a heightened risk, or do we have management plans to deal with the possibility of the interface between a naturally occurring wildfire and the pipeline?
I'll go to Ms. St. Louis.
Thank you for the question through the chair. Yes, if there was a wildfire that occurred due to any ignition source, I mean, we have all of our existing all hazards plan, which would be the plans that we would use to activate a response. So whether or not the ignition source is related to an industrial hazard or whether it's related to recreational use, I mean, our plans remain the same. That being said, I think similar to maybe some of the comments related to Councillor Stoner's question about WLNG being included, perhaps Fortis could always be another participant that we could engage as part of future discussions in the committee meetings, just to talk about what their wildfire mitigation risks or wildfire mitigation practices are and how that could influence our response.
Okay, Ms. Glende.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a reminder for council and for the community that the BC Energy Regulator, who does regulate the pipeline, is coming to present to council in May. So further questions can be prepared for that.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Greenlaw.
Thanks. Through the chair, I think my question is for staff. I had a very lovely fire smart person come to my house last year, and she started talking about a development that was happening that was using a whole bunch of cedar hedges all over the place, getting planted probably right about now. And so this is a year ago, right? And my question to staff is there some way that we can include in our LDAs and our agreements with developers some sort of way of effectively keeping their landscaping up to date with our Fire Smart code? Because I dug into, she told me that there is no way to change this because this had been agreed upon a long time ago. And I dug into it as well, and I found the same thing. There was no way to adjust their landscaping that had not been done yet to be up to code with Fire Smart. So I think that that would be a really great initiative, given that we're having a difficulty, like a lot of these developments that we're approving right now are not being built for years and years and years. And in that time, these plans will evolve. So if we could start including some language in these agreements that keep it, a little bit open-ended so that we can change some of these landscaping pieces or whatever initiatives are coming out of FireSmart that can be kind of retroactively applied to the LDAs. Is there any way that we can do that?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. Yes, there was one development that we ran into this issue where they had a long-standing development permit that was approved already. But I think that was the only case that we've run into, and we can certainly take that away for any situations where a land development agreement gets renegotiated for some reason to include this consideration. In that case, the land development agreement was all done and the development permit was issued or approved. So that was the one case that we had. But I don't believe we will have many more of such cases, because most developments that are going through the DP process now, they have to comply with the landscaping guidelines.
But when they have to comply with the landscaping guidelines, is that like a living agreement that can change over time, so that if we do have other adjustments to like the FireSmart pieces, that they'll be represented in that? Or is that something that involves an entirely new renegotiation of these agreements?
Through the chair, once the landscaping goes in, essentially that's where we can't go back and revisit. So development permits that are subject to current guidelines, they get locked in to delivering that landscaping. And then when it's delivered, that's where it ends.
No, I get when it's delivered, that's when it ends, but it's that time in between of it being delivered and it being agreed upon. Like if there are changes, can we go in and say, actually, you can't plant 1,000 cedars. Can you please plant, I don't know, huckleberry bushes or something instead? But anyways, okay. That's pretty much the question I had. Yeah. Oh, actually, I had one other question. There was some conversation around the right-of-way maintenance, and I was wondering if you had any comments on how you see that playing out. My concern is that some of the right-of-way maintenance could be reliant upon harmful herbicides like glyphosates. And I'm wondering if that, like, where do those decisions lie?
I can answer to this one. So the role of the district would really just be an advocating role, and each utility provider has their own set of best management practices. So it would be up to the district, potentially the FireSmart coordinator, to just keep communication every year to follow their best management practices, and that would be by digging into what their best management practices are or referencing FireSmart materials. But typically it is it's removing trees. It's trees and grass that are growing up, and it's usually manually brushing. I'm not familiar with any utility provider that uses herbicides for their right-of-way maintenance.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Stoner, and then I have a couple. Oh, no, okay. Before I go to the mayor, who I think has a proposed resolution, just listening to this, I had some questions when I went through in terms of prioritization about it focuses on fire department staffing and equipment related to wildfire, and then also some evacuation drills as happening before updates to our emergency plan, which seemed out of order to me. And then I know we're working on a steep slopes development permit area guideline, but some of these things maybe are better positioned in subdivision and control bylaw. We do have our fire-related, wildfire-related DPA guidelines. So just some questions about how we reconcile all this. I gather from staff, we need to approve a plan, and we expect to iterate on it and so on. So I'm just wondering if there's, is that just sort of obvious that will happen, or is there a way to adjust this resolution a little bit? And I guess my concern is not wanting to be in a position where it is assumed these priorities and everything are accepted and we want to see them in the next budget? Because it sounds like there's still some examination that needs to be done on this plan before we sort of lock all these things down. We need to understand what work's already ongoing and where this all fits. So is that sort of like, we don't need to change the resolution, that'll just all happen and get adjusted before we get into budgeting and so on? Or is there, should we adjust this resolution so that this comes back to council, once priorities are more finalized, or if you know what I mean?
Thank you for the question through the chair. Yeah, I mean, I think as with all things, plans are guidelines. And I think what Blackwell has done is they've given us a really strong roadmap about things that we can prioritize or things we can look at. I think as with all things, I'll take the Fire Smart program for an example. This is a program where we will be we're hoping to get, 200,000 of additional funding for 2 years, and then it drops off to 100K annual. No funding for fuel treatment. So as with most things, we get a plan and we try to see what we can right size, what we can prioritize, and what we can do. And that's just, one narrow piece of the CWRP. We've talked about other items that you're bringing up for some of our bylaws that might need to get adjusted. And so I don't think, in my opinion, when I'm looking to council to endorse this plan, I think it's saying like, hey, we think that Blackwell has identified some good things for us to work on. And then staff can go back and say, okay, with the resources that we have, this is what we can do. And that will inevitably be a budget discussion as well. But in my mind, I'm not viewing this as a prescriptive guideline that we have to adhere to. It's just essentially giving us a lot of good insights into what we as a district could look to prioritize or could look to achieve to reduce our wildfire risk.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'll chew on that a little bit. I'll go to Mayor Herford if you wanted to test a resolution.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to move the staff recommendation with one addition, that the WLNG facility be added to section 3.3.6.
Okay. Seconder from Councillor Stoner.
So I'll just speaking to the addition piece. I'll start with. I think in section 3.3.6, for those that don't have the report in front of them, a simple paragraph just stating that the highway follows Highway 90, or the railway follows Highway 99. Highway 99 runs through the territory, through the study area. Fortis BC operates an underground natural gas pipeline distribution. Just a little paragraph that it exists. That's what that piece aims to do. If we need to amend this to be clear on that, I'm happy to do it. But I feel there's just a paragraph missing of this facility that's currently under construction, and we're hearing will be operational through the time sort of span that this plan's meant to be relevant. So that's why I made that. I hope that addition is supportable. Just as recently as yesterday, Acting Mayor Pettingill and myself met with Tourism Squamish, and they expressed specifically an interest to be engaged in emergency planning. And I see some of those actions there as things that are sort of already underway, and maybe they could be supported with materials. We've got a very active group. We've already heard in this discussion about the visitor management table, and I think this is a key part of it. I still have some questions about how what the right way to address those big pieces of private property, and how what role that those properties can play in our community safety and resiliency, and how we impact that. We know that the funding for this stuff isn't huge. I'm not suggesting that, and I'm not actually clear what the hazards exist there. I'm just assuming that there's going to be some because they're large forested areas. But overall, I think this is great work. There's some good recommendations that in endorsing this, we're endorsing in my concept, these recommendations finding their way into our workflows and seeing what is right for Squamish and what is achievable given all the moving pieces that we have. And perhaps some of the mechanisms aren't, we might be able to find some different mechanisms to address these issues with the processes that we have underway. So I'm happy to see this come forward. I think it's great work, and it we need to keep our eye on this piece as last year's experience. I hope this is a lesson that we've learned before that, but it reinforces the need to continue this work. So thank you for everybody involved.
Thank you, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I'm happy to support the motion on the floor and agree with the addition of WLNG in section 3.36, just identifying it as one of the hazardous values in our community. I think makes good sense and ensures that that section is fulsome in the context that it's providing to a reader of the report. I do really want to thank staff for the proactive work that they've done with UBCM in terms of the timing of all of this vis-a-vis some of the really disappointing announcements from the province that the CRI, the community, I should know the acronym, but the CRI funding is shifting in the way that it's been provided to communities. This has been a really important funding program for local governments across the province in doing the really critical work that we know saves time, saves money, saves lives, saves structures at the end of the day by doing the prevention work that we know is necessary. And it's really disappointing to see. I will say we did get a little bit of good news early March that the province is adding an extra 15 million into the fund, but it will still remain on an adjudicated basis as opposed to the previous version. So just a thanks to staff for aligning the timelines on the funding requirements and getting this report done in order to be able to secure, hopefully, those additional 2 years of funding to be able to do this important work for our community. I think the report that has been presented, thanks to the consultants at Blackwell for pulling all of these pieces together. It is a comprehensive report that provides us a really strong foundation for the wildfire management and planning work that we know we need to do in our community. As we look forward, it will be up to council and staff to wrestle with how we prioritize that vis-a-vis the other natural hazards that we know we have, the planning work that we need to do to ensure that we are well prepared for evacuations versus the subdivision and control bylaw and how all those pieces fit together and where we prioritize that work. But I think that this lays it out in a really clear way of some of the key opportunities in front of us. So I'm happy to support the motion on the floor and just thanks again for the work.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Anderson and then Councillor French.
Thank you. I'll also be speaking in support of the endorsing this report with the amendment from Mayor Herford. I'm very happy to see that 2 district parks have risen up in the queue as treatment priorities, namely Merrill Park, which has a tree disease problem, which likely exacerbates the risk potential for fire, and Smoke Bluffs Park. Smoke Bluffs Park has had 4 serious forest fires, more than any other part of the valley, including Debeck's Hill, which has had 2 or 3. And Smoke Bluffs Park, I note that the mention is given in the Blackwell report to the stand densities, which have only increased over the years, which are a risk factor. And also the report has paid attention to that there is a Smoke Bluffs Park committee, which could be brought on board to provide advice toward a strategy. On the top of, or the summit of Smoke Bluffs Park are some ponds, and maybe watering, keeping those ponds moist over the summer season, something like that. But what I'm pointing to here is the value of that grassroots knowledge of the park in that area, and the report acknowledges this and points to utilizing it. Otherwise, I also note that there is a large block of private land in the interface zone that is part of the private managed forest land program. And in future editions of this plan, we might highlight that program because the private managed forest lands have its own regulations and also best practices. And this may be present some opportunities for collaboration with the holder of that private managed forest land. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor French and then Councillor Greenlaw.
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy with the wildlife resilience plan we've got in front of us, and I think that this document will serve us well. And I'd rather see us press ahead to try and get the limited funding that's available. And I think that the plan that we've got here is as closest to perfection as we need at this point. So I support the motion.
Hey, Councillor Greenlaw.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll support the motion on the floor. I do think I really like the idea of having community champions for FireSmart. I think this is a great way to keep the community involved, and if possible, these community champions could eventually evolve into community groups that could be activated if there's a case of emergency. They could be kind of trained up to, check on neighbors and know what people in their community's needs are and pieces like that. Mate very well with our evacuation plan, because I think it gives people a feeling of autonomy and usefulness in a time of danger, which is good. Yeah. The fuel management forum, I really like that as well. This is another great way to utilize knowledge in our community and help keep us safe. We have a lot of informed people in our community, especially with the history of forestry that we have. So I think that's great to use our public resources in that. And personally, I'm a yes to evacuation drills. I've mentioned this a few times in council now. I think it would serve our community very well to have a town hall or open forum conversation about our current evacuation plan to at least keep our public informed. We've had a lot of changes since that evacuation plan came in. Some of them have been discussed today. We have a large industrial project in our community now, which changes the landscape, not to mention our population changes. But something I'd like to know is, has there been any communication with Woodfibre about what their role would be in the case of an emergency or an evacuation of the town? Like, that site might be a good muster point, and have any of those conversations happen? And like, there are 2 cruise ships hanging out there. Could they be used to evacuate people from our community and pieces around that? And also, what happens if there is an emergency and the people in Woodfibre are isolated? How are we extracting those people, and what's happening? Like, I'm sure Woodfibre has some sort of evacuation plan, but are we part of that conversation? Are we informed? I also think that item 5.1.14, the tourism campaign, should have an increased prioritization. Tourism is our largest industry, and we have lots of people who visit our town to play in the backcountry. So education, which are otherwise known as little fire starters. So education through tourism Squamish is key. And I also want to echo Councillor Anderson's comments about engaging the Smokeless Park Committee, because I think they hold a lot of knowledge as well. But thanks for the hard work, and I look forward to this moving forward. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I'll also be supporting the resolution with the adjusted resolution. This is a topic of a lot of community interest, so I did want to give it a bit more time, given that that's where we went. A few extra thoughts. I think involving landscapers is actually quite important. I believe a number of people look to landscapers to understand fire safe and invasive species and those things. They don't necessarily feel like they have the expertise. And so I think engaging the people that are doing the work on this would help us achieve our goals. So I'll just leave that as a comment. I appreciate that the Woodfibre and Fortis infrastructure, maybe an assessment of that doesn't belong here, but the consequence, if something happens with any of that infrastructure, completely changes the dynamics of where we are in terms of a wildfire. Even if it's not the cause, it will be a secondary massive cause, and it impacts our resourcing in terms of equipment and fire department and all of that. So if we don't deal with it here, I can appreciate that, but that is something that both on the Woodfibre and Fortis side, I think needs to be examined. These aren't normal projects that happen everywhere. This is a pretty unique, very high pressure, very high volume thing right in the middle of a community in a wildfire area. And so that will require some investigation. I appreciate the fact that that these priorities aren't necessarily locked in stone, and we'll have a chance to assess and see how these pieces fit together. And I know that some of these topics are points of discussion in the steep slopes DPA and so on. So seeing that all come together will be a good thing. So with that, I will call a question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We did have 15-minute break. I'm going to shave that down to 5 minutes. And so we will come back at 11:25 for our next topic. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Ng, but before we do, who's our Economic Development Officer, so we're going to hear about our economic development strategy and work plan update, where we've been, where we are. Just for some context to folks, there will be some opportunity for discussion, but our real opportunity to adjust, if we think adjustments are appropriate, would be in the next budget cycle, or possibly strategic planning, which would be the next group that comes to sit at this table. So just to put that context in here, and we are still running behind, so if we can keep things tight, we can maybe get back on track. But with that context, I will turn it over to Ms. Ng. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Council and the community. I am Patricia Ng, Economic Development Officer at the District of Squamish, and I'm accompanied today for this presentation by Julie Wangi, General Manager of Corporate Services. We are here to address the December 9th, 2025 motion that Council directs staff to come back to a future committee of the whole with an update and review of our current economic development strategy and work plan for Council and community information. So the purpose of today's presentation is to review the economic development's previous priorities and work plan prior to the team's restructuring in 2025, and update Council and the community on economic development's current priorities and work plan. The slide you see before you is a visual representation of the district's Economic Development Department's strategy and work plan and how it has evolved over time. Starting in 2020, the Economic Development Department was focused on prioritizing business and investment attraction, followed by community capacity and resource building in alignment with the 2020 to 2022 Economic Action Plan. The department's work plan focused on 4 areas: 1, local business intelligence analysis; 2, business development; 3, strategic sector development; and 4, circular economy development. With the development and implementation of Council's 2023 to 26 strategic plan, this focus continued to support 2 of the key objectives. Objective 4.2, increase economic activity in the core, enabling emerging economic sectors for the economic development strategy, sector strategy. And objective 1.4, building relationships with community groups to increase community capacity and resources. In 2023, the Economic Development Department consisted of a team of up to 5 members who led and facilitated the development and execution of programs and activities to accomplish this work plan, guided by the Economic Leadership Team and Economic Partner Forum advisors and support from our community partners. In 2024, several key grant applications were unsuccessful, and Council approved a service level change in the 2024 to 28 financial plan bylaw, resulting in a reduction in the size of the Economic Development Department. The Economic Development Department's delivery then shifted to a present team of up to 3 members, grant dependent, with the revised goal to lead and facilitate activities and programs to empower our community partners to support the district in advancing its current official community plan, strategic plan, and master plans where possible. In 2025, Council approved the Community Agreements Policy and a critical resource, a Community Partnerships Coordinator, to implement the policy, which placed the implementation of the policy mandate and the resource within the Economic Development Department beginning this year in 2026. Implementing this community agreements policy prioritizes the community capacity and resource building tactic within the department while continuing to attract business and investment to our community, as you can see represented on the slide with the change in prioritization of the tactics. The intention for the Economic Development Department to increase community capacity and resources is not only through implementing the community agreements policy, but also through exploring funding strategies as they relate to the objectives of the Recreation Center Task Force. The department's also committed to executing 2 grant-funded projects that are circular economy focused, funded by the Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Program, or REDIP, between 2026 and 2027, which involve creating a labor force development plan and leveraging district procurement activities to adopt and integrate a circular economy. The work of the department at the district continues to be in support of the goals, strategies, and plans endorsed by council, including the Emerging Sector Roadmap and Action Plan, Business Ecosystem Development Plan, the Circular Economy Plan, Community Climate Action Plan, Economic Reconciliation, and Donut Economics. The Economic Development Department continues to focus and lead and facilitate various areas, including collaborating with our current community partners, hosting events to support our local business community, and engaging with advisors within the Economic Leadership Team and Economic Forum as required. The team also supports various district departments to provide an economic development lens and perspective to projects and decisions. In 2026, the Economic Development Department is supporting planning and real estate in executing a marine impact study and Squamish Adventure Center opportunities, respectively. To share a follow-up to 2 longstanding initiatives that the team has been involved in at council's discretion, the district has recently received news from the province that there is no current provincial uptake nor avenues to advance the Green Innovation Hub and inclusion consideration to the Island Coastal Economic Trust. This concludes our update, and we are pleased to answer any questions council may have on the current economic development strategy and work plan.
So, council, thank you very much. Council, any questions? Councillor Stoner.
I will kick us off. Thanks for the presentation and the update. I think this is really helpful for clarity, definitely for me, and I suspect for many of our community partners too. A few questions, specifically the shift that's presented in terms of supporting the Economic Leadership Team and the Economic Partners Forum as advisors. I'm just curious if that has been communicated to the folks who sit at those tables and better understanding of like what their role is. I'm just really cognizant when we ask people to put their time up and attend or participate in these things that they are being well utilized, and it's clear what we're asking them to do. And so I'm just curious if that's been communicated to those folks and what their new, if their role has shifted, what does that look like?
Through the chair, yes. We had a meeting with both groups in May or June of last year, 2025. And we had, prior to that, we had interviewed, we had invited folks for an interview. And so I think we had about 12 interviews with each of them to see the evolution of the groups and how they were experiencing how their experience has been and how they want to see it evolved and their contributions in it. And so gathering that feedback went into that meeting with the 2 groups, and it was decided on as a group that it would be helpful to have the economic leadership team as a group to talk about our different strategies throughout the year and how we might be able to work together and collaborate on the shared priorities that we have. And for the economic leadership team, that we would form working groups as necessary for specific projects. And they could sign up for ones if they had an interest and or wanted to share their skill set on. And so we had a form that went out, and the different members had voted on which ones they would want to be involved in. So yes, definitely a shift in how we have been working with them, and there was consensus on how we wanted to move together working forward.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thanks for that clarity. My other question is with the refocus on the community capacity and the agreements policy. I know there are a number of some of our core community agreements that are kind of on 1-year agreements to try and get us to the next budget because just the timing of it. Can I just get confirmation with this refocus that those will be seen in the 2027 budget? I'm thinking kind of Sorka, I think it was Squamish Can. There was another one that was had kind of been bridged, we'll say.
Yes, through the chair, for 2027, we have advised our current community partners, total of 15 of them, to renew 1-year agreements for the 2027 year. So we will draft those this year. And in this year, we will open that up to our current community partners to apply for the community agreements policy program for the 2028 financial plan, starting then. So we will need to open up the intakes for our current community partners this year, later in the fall, for them to put in formal proposals to have multi-year agreement proposals starting for the 2028 financial year.
Sorry, can you further clarify why that won't be in place until 2028? I thought that was the addition of the staff member for this current budget cycle to get that work done in time for 2027.
Thank you. Through the chair, the additional staff member is due to come on shortly. However, we have already started and been engaged in the financial planning process for this year. We kick off early, starting in, I believe it's March and April of this year. So we will not be able to incorporate those agreements into this cycle, but we will be able to set up ourselves with the assistance of that position to be able to be in a position to do it for the following year.
I'll mull on that for a second. Okay, and then I was also curious, just in terms of the areas of support to other components of the organization. I think the other big one that I see on the horizon in terms of community planning is there's been an application for the start of the neighborhood planning process for the second phase of Chikai, which we know is a very substantial component of economic strategy. And so I'm just curious how we support the integration of our economic development team in that work that's going to go forward, or if that has been thought about.
Through the chair, unfortunately, we don't have a member of the community planning department here to talk with us. But yes, absolutely. So when those projects kick off, all of the supporting teams in the district contribute into that project as well. We don't have our defined roles for economic development in terms of that support at the moment, but that is another area.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. A follow-up question from Councillor Stoner's question about our ability to implement community partner program in 2027. If I understood the response, it's that we've already started financial planning for 2027. So it's too late to put in changes to the 2027 financial plan. I'm just trying to understand, like, we're not even through Q1 2026, and I know the planning starts early, but I'm having trouble understanding how it can't be incorporated into the plan.
Yeah, through the chair. So financial planning at the district, as you can imagine, for any municipality is very complicated and very involved. And so we are already in the process. All of the departments and the divisions are currently submitting their plans for 2027 already. And we still need to develop the communications, roll out the policies to our partners, and then be able to get all their feedback back, including their applications, before we would be able to submit that information into the financial plan, which would put us at the end of the financial planning process and when we would be presenting those numbers to council. So unfortunately, it does not provide us with a big enough runway to do it this year.
So I'll take a bite on this topic. We had, and maybe I'm thinking about the wrong bucket, but a certain percentage of capital expenditure, and maybe this is what's going into the community foundation and the Squamish Arts grants program that I'm getting confused. But in my mind, I think a piece of that sort of dedicated funding had been allocated to some of these partners, and so I guess I'm wondering, can we not sort of at least have an envelope or a sense of an envelope we can work in for 2027, and then how we divvy up that envelope, can still be determined, but we sort of know what the envelope is nowish, or am I missing a piece?
Thank you. Through the chair. Given the scope of today, which was updating Council on Economic Development Department priorities, staff would need to look into that more in depth in terms of the question around planning, the question here around finance, and we can provide an answer to that to Council at a later date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, any more questions before we move on? Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Chair. I wondered whether it would be opportunity for comments in addition to questions at this time.
I think we would move receipt of the presentation, and then we can get into comments. Oh, Councillor French has a question. So I'll go to Councillor French's question, then if someone moves, then we can get into comments.
Thanks, Chair, and I think it's quick. In the slide for the row work plan focus, in the blue box, unfunded projects, including RCTF, I feel like I should know what that stands for, but can you give me a refresher?
Yes, Recreation Center Task Force. Yes.
Okay, so given where we are, I will move that we receive the report. If someone would like to second, Councillor Greenlaw seconds. I just start by saying thank you for just the refresher on where we've been, where we are right now, and I think it does. We've had some questions, which it sounds like answers will come back in the future. And it's good context, I think, as we go into our next budgeting. With that, I will go to comments, and Councillor Anderson, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I might suggest that my comments are directed to all of us, really, and in particular to my colleagues, and not specifically directed to staff. Firstly, when we look at our council strategic plan, staff report has highlighted 4.2 increasing economic activity in the core enabling emerging sectors, but there's also another council objective under that heading of being prepared for the future, namely 4.4, creating a net increase of employment lands and spaces, both on land and marine. And that's critically important to enabling our economic development growth and indeed retaining companies here today. So we don't, under that 4.4 objective, have tactics that we can really point to at this time. The SIMS modeling is not really directed towards, for example, industrial lands. It's something to think about in future. The other observation I'll make is that we do have some proposed programs and some OCP items that we should recognize as important for both of those two objectives in Council Strategic Plan. One is the airport strategy. There's quite a number of jobs involved here, new jobs as well as the current ones. We also have marine action strategy. The staff report has highlighted the marine impact study, but that is just an assessment of impacts and their significance of various sectors or subsectors. Is not a plan. In future, we will need a plan. And in the OCP, there are two elements: maintaining a regular update of employment lands inventory. That's something we haven't addressed during our term. It's something we might keep in mind. It's clearly stated in the OCP, clearly relevant to all of the above, if you like. And finally, and this relates to Councillor Stoner's point regarding the Chikai fan and its significance in the planning there, is the forestry land strategy. That's also in the OCP. We have currently forest industry companies, including First Nations companies, looking for land. So these are items that we have in our plans and strategies that we shouldn't overlook their significance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go to Councillor Greenlaw, who I missed. Apologize.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Through the chair, I just wanted to thank you for the work that you've done. It's great to see updates on this important work. But also, I've been talking to the Chamber and the BIA, and they just want to offer that they would love to have more collaboration with the district and more communication with the district. So just keeping that in mind in general with economic development as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay. I know the mayor does have monthly meetings, and so there is some collaboration there. But point well taken. I think if there are no further comments, I will call a question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? And we have received the presentation. So thank you very much. Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Just a question for clarity after the motion. Does staff need, through some comments, it was implied that staff would be coming back with additional information on whether it was possible to move the community partnership policy actual commitments into 2027. Does staff need a motion to that effect to bring that information forward, or is the conversation sufficient?
Through the chair, staff are going to be bringing back when it makes sense an update on the community partnership program, but that wouldn't including it in the 2027 budget. If that's something that council wants us to research, I can't promise that we can make it happen, but yeah, a motion would be helpful.
Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, thanks. Before a motion gets put on the floor, it would be helpful for me just to ground you this. And if you don't have the information right now, that's fine. I appreciate it's out of scope from today's conversation. But from my recollection, there were, I think, 3 core agreements that we had bridged through 2026 with the anticipation that we'd be able to get to an agreement by 2027. So I hear that there's like 15 agreements out there. I'm just curious if there's a way to get those core 3 into the 2027 budget through the new model. Given that we've already asked them to bridge for a year, it creates a lot of uncertainty to do so. And so I'm just like, maybe that's part of the motion, but yeah, I can include that in a motion, but I'm trying to ground truth my recollection of this.
Thank you. Through the chair, if we could have a timeout, that would be helpful for us to help council figure out the next step here.
Okay, yeah, I will do that. And I just, as I'm hearing, I think there's some clarity on our flexibility, understanding, is there actually an established envelope we could work in, or are we starting sort of from building up a budget from zero in terms of community partner, and especially with the 3 existing programs is sort of where the question is. And if we can answer it briefly today, great. If not, we can figure out how to move that forward later. So we'll take 10 minutes. Okay, so we'll come back at noon, and we're in a short recess. Thank you. over to Ms. Vengi, I think, in terms of where we are.
Thank you. Through the chair, staff will need some time to be able to provide this information to council. So we are suggesting that council direct staff to provide an update on the status of implementation of the community agreements policy and advise whether it's possible to implement the policy for the 2027 budget, and staff would be able to return to council with that information.
Okay, great. Thank you. I will move that. Is there a seconder? Mayor Herford. Thank you. Don't think we need any discussion on that, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? No. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We will take about 4 minutes maybe, and then I will turn it over to Mr. Velaniskis at 12:05 for our Community Housing Accelerator Fund expenditures update. All right, it sounds like we are ready, so I will turn it over to you, Mr. Velaniskis, our Senior Director of Community Development, and let you introduce your team and take away the presentation.
Thank you. With me today is Jesse Fletcher, the Manager of Current Planning. And we are presenting a summary of expenditures for the 2026 that are related to the CMHC Housing Action Fund grant. So this update was requested by Council on March 24th. And so we're following up in advance of the spring amendment, which was part of the motion that requested this item. Some background on the HAF funding. So it's a 4-year funding commitment from CMHC that the district has secured. It goes from 2024 to 2027, and with a total of $7 million over those 4 years. It's $1.75 million per year. To date, the district has received $5.25 million. And that essentially represents the 3 years of funding, 24, 25, and this year, 26. In 2026, we have $776,000 that have been unspent from previous years that have been carried forward into this year. $500,000 of that funding is allocated for servicing works at 39900 Government Road, which is a district parcel scheduled for supportive housing and a future affordable housing development. That funding got allocated in 2025. However, the agreement that's necessary to allocate those funds to who's going to be doing the work hasn't been signed yet. So we're still working on that. And so that's why the funds have been carried forward into 2026. We expect that we will be signing that agreement in 2026. And out of that 776,000, 276,000 are unallocated at this point and will need to be allocated. The funding was, the agreement started in 2024, which means that by January of 2028, all the funds have to be spent. And that's a condition of the grant. The final payment is scheduled for 2027. However, I would say it's highly uncertain at this point because the final payment depends to a degree on our permitting numbers. So the housing starts, and we have a growing deficit of those housing starts because there's been, an international slump in housing starts and construction in general related to construction costs and demand. So we don't know exactly how CMHC is going to calculate that last payment. We just know that they will be using the housing start numbers. So it could be that there's nothing in 2027, or there could be that there's something in 2027. But the full funding is certainly unlikely. And this is my last slide. So as described in the memo, this table represents the expenditures in 2026. We have $1.2 million in staff resourcing and streamlining development permitting process. So that's additional staffing capacity that's been secured in multiple departments, as well as related staff positions to implement the HAF work and the permitting work. It is something that's captured in our agreement with CMHC. So this item has to stay in place during the term of the agreement. There's 69,000 this year that's allocated for consulting support for various projects. So this involves servicing planning work that's going on with the Garibaldi Estates neighborhood plan and implementation. The neighborhood nodes project used some of this funding. And so some of these projects are actually in the HAF agreement, some are not. The neighborhood nodes project was one that was in the HAF agreement and is now considered complete. Then we have 500,000 that's allocated as capacity funding to the Squamish Community Housing Society, and that's an annual amount. We have the infrastructure grant I just spoke about in the previous slide of 500,000 for government roadside, and then the annual allocated amount of 276,000. And that's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Council, questions? Councillor Stoner?
Thank you, through the chair. I feel like it's the report back on Councillor Stoner Motions Day with the previous presentation in this one. So thanks for the insights here and coming back before the spring amendment. I guess my main questions are around the investments in the HAF action plan and the staff resourcing component. Appreciate the descriptor that's in the staff report. I guess I'm first curious about how we're tracking and measuring progress in this area. So like all the policy work, from what I understand with the presentation that was back in March, is mostly complete. There's still this question around addressing the bottlenecks in our process. So how are we measuring, like what is that actually addressing, and how are we measuring the impact of that?
So the intent of that funding was to eliminate bottlenecks essentially between planning, building, environment, and engineering. And so that's been, I would say, achieved. We have recently presented to council on review timelines for different types of applications. And so essentially that is our measure of success. Yeah.
So I wonder if you can describe a little bit what has gone into that line item then. Like, are we talking about 4 FTEs? Is it specifically consulting support? And what's the durability of that? So this funding ends in 2027. The intent is not to just streamline application process is through a slump in the market, but intended on the long term. So how do we make sure that that is long-term work, not just immediate responsive work? I guess that's my first question.
That is a great question. Thank you. We are working on a transitional plan that will be presented to council in the budget consideration for 2027 and beyond. So what to do when this funding runs out and how to supplement it or replace it or change practice, essentially. That is the work that's currently ongoing.
Okay, and I don't want to presuppose that presentation, but I guess just some better understanding of like, when did those additional resources come online? I'll be like very frank. I've heard more from the development community about the challenges getting through our process in the past 6 months than the past 3 years combined in this seat. And so I'm trying to figure out how these resources are supporting the improvement in process and how we can better communicate that other than we've done it internally and it's working.
Through the chair, I don't know what the feedback has been, and if you, if council members could provide it to staff, it would be very useful. Some of the challenges we're seeing now is developments not moving ahead, and so the conversations we're having are about renewals of permits. So they're very different challenges than when we started this project of streamlining the approval process. But it is, yeah, I can't respond to what council may have heard because we might have different information.
That's fair. I'm not asking you to respond to comments that I've received that you haven't been privy to, but I am curious if you can explain like what has like tangibly been delivered by this $1.2 million within your team, within the process, and how are we communicating that to our partners and community?
Thank you for the clarification. Every year it slightly differs how that $1.2 million gets allocated, or whether it's 1.2. I think it's been a different amount every year, and so most of it goes into staff that are working in the permitting pipeline, and that includes building, engineering, environment, and planning resources. And then there's the supporting staff that, organizationally we need to have in order to grow the permitting. There's IT implications and things like that. The resourcing plan for which positions get resourced, I believe, was part of the consultation when we were developing the housing action plan with development stakeholders. But we haven't really gone back and checked in with that group about how things are going. We have quarterly meetings. I think it's 4 times a year with the Urban Development Institute, and so we are, we're hearing the feedback, how things are going on a regular basis. Things are taking too long is not a theme anymore. I would say that what it was prior to 2024. Like I said, challenges are a little different now, but staff could take some feedback away that we need to check in with our development community on what the specific challenges are.
Okay, that's helpful. So just to clarify, this is additional resourcing, but there's no like detailed or structured review of our permitting process and improvements thereof that is being conducted with this money. It is an addition of resources, not a structured review of how we handle development permit process.
That work is also occurring, but it's not part of this item.
Is that something that council will that there'll be visibility into? It'll be reported on. There's structure there, like we can track and measure progress and explain how we've changed our processing permits or our permitting processes.
Absolutely. I think that this resourcing capacity is allowing us to have the resources to track our work, and the work is getting more predictable. So yes, this will enable us to do that.
Councillor Hamilton?
Yeah, thanks very much. Along the line of, along Councillor Stoner's questions regarding tracking and external monitoring or external information on how our processes are progressing, Council passed a motion, I think it was a couple months ago, to receive a budget estimate for an external consultant review of our development permit processes. Has there been any progress on that item? I wasn't scheduled to come back for a little bit, but it seems related to this idea. I was wondering if it had any progress.
I'll turn over to Ms. Glende.
I don't want to step in the way of staff answering the question, but I do want to the motion that staff are responding to today is an overview of the Housing Accelerator Fund expenses. The previous motion and digging into system improvements and process review is not something that staff were prepared for today. We could answer it as best as possible. We didn't expect it to be part of this memo.
Okay, thank you. Did staff want to add anything at this point?
Nothing else to add.
Okay. I will just add, so implicit in what I heard so far is our assumption that we may not see all the 2027 funding. Are we confident, though, that, because I don't recall, and maybe I'm misremembering, but that our sort of targets under the grant program were year specific. So do we have confidence that if we don't hit final numbers, that the government or CMHC won't try and claw back 2025 or 2026 payments?
No, I don't think that there hasn't been any indication from CMHC that would happen. It's our understanding that the program, the HAF program, puts 25% of the weight on funding on achieving permitting targets, which would be that last year of funding. So that would track with the way the program was laid out.
Okay, thank you. And then just, reflecting on what's going on in the world right now, there's a war, which seems pretty big, and inflation, recession, all these things falling out from it. I feel like we've sort of done a lot to work on our processes and do sort of all the things that upper orders of government have asked us to do in this respect. In your perspective, is there anything we could be doing or should be doing as a council to sort of advocate about, that 2027 funding, even if we're not hitting the permit numbers? Because there's a lot of things that are, global in scale. It feels like we've done all the work and then some. Is there a piece or a place or a time or suggestions from staff on how do we tackle that? Or that's up to us at this table to figure out?
What I will say is that staff, we have to do annual reporting to CMHC, and we always provide the context of why our numbers are what they are and what additional actions the district has taken to support new housing starts. And so I think whatever else that council would like to do would be up to council.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, I think to help support your question, Chair, I can guarantee we're not the only community that is in this scenario with CMHC and the Housing Accelerator Fund. I know that there is ongoing conversations with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to start to push on a little bit of advocacy here to CMHC and the federal government on the importance of maintaining and recognizing the full years of the grants that have been signed. Granted, it's always up to CMHC as the funder how they decide to do that, but I do think that there's a strong advocacy network here, given that we're one of many communities who are in a similar position.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. I guess just one follow-up question then. In what's presented to us, there's 276,000 of unallocated at the moment. We are presuming that 2027 funding may be a challenge. Do we have a sense, or when do we get a sense of we really need to look at what we're planning for in 2027 and some of that needs to come forward or needs to be set aside, or have we sort of notionally said 2027 stuff assigned to this isn't happening and this 276 is free and clear? It's not the exact right way to frame it, but
the strategy we're working on now for the preparation of the 2027 budget is assuming that there is no 2027 funding, and so if it does come through, it will be something that we will have to address early in 2027, because of course we won't find out if we're getting it until probably about March of 2027.
Okay, Mayor Herford.
Thank you. Just on this unallocated amount, is it something that's budgeted and staff and council have the ability to use that for things that fit, or is this sort of effectively a projected carry forward? I'm just trying to understand what sometimes we approve sort of an envelope and then there's actions inside of that. Where does this particular piece sit?
The unallocated amount has been carried forward from 2025 into 2026, and it will either be allocated by council in 2026 or will carry on into 2027 and then will get utilized in that year. But I would expect that staff would bring forward a report if there was anything recommended to council for allocation.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands. Councillor Stoner moves her seat. Mayor Herford seconds. Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, I just want to thank staff for this report and adding some visibility and clarity into the Housing Accelerator Fund budget. It's not often that we get $7 million in grant funding, and so it's helpful to understand how we're using that in order to achieve both the permitting targets that are set within the grant, but also the grant is intended to support improved processes and the infrastructure in order to support housing development and delivery. And we know that we have a lot of infrastructure needs. And so that was part of my query, was just if there is cash there that we can put towards, there's some significant improvements that need to happen at our water wells, for example, then like just weighing the benefits and the opportunities there with money that doesn't come around from the federal government very often. So thanks for the insights in the discussion today.
Mayor Herford? Nope. Okay. I think had a good discussion, so I will leave it there and call the question on the motion to receive. So all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And with that, we'll entertain a motion to terminate. Councillor Hamilton, I think, got there first. Councillor Stoner seconds. All those in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. And we are done, Council. We are back for a closed at 1:30. So we will see you back shortly.